All rise, please. Sir, your floor is now accepted.
All right, be seated, please. We have a packed courtroom this morning. We're here in the matter of the hidden rate in Island litigation. Jim Moskal, Jana Ramsey, and Tom Hammond here for defendant Wolverine Worldwide. On behalf of the Varnum plaintiffs, we have Aaron Phelps and Kyle Nowinski. On behalf of 3M, we have Bob Dion and Robert Dion.
We're here today because Varnum is cherry picking what they produce in this case. And as a result,
Wolverine's produced a lot of stuff, haven't they?
Wolverine has produced quite a number of documents, including the exact documents we're requesting in this motion.
There is no allegation in the complaint that when Wolverine disposed of PFAS waste, Wolverine even knew PFAS was there. So it is impossible that Wolverine, by disposing of the Scotchgard waste, intended to cause PFAS to touch them. It's impossible.
Your Honor, what's been alleged is that Wolverine intended tannery waste, which at all times they did know contained Scotchgard, which is PFAS, and they intended it to go into the groundwater. This is not an accidental dumping, it's not a spill. They had a piece of property where they went out, used it for the express purpose of disposal. They had engineered drawings as to how they were going to dispose it. The drawings show that the first step was to remove the clay. So if there was any clay that might have prevented the tannery waste from getting into the groundwater, step one was remove that.
Fabrics treated with Scotchgard brand fabric protectors survive almost anything. Drips and dribbles just bead out on the surface, waiting to be wiped or blotted away. And if you don't see this tag, put it to work.
Every litter bit hurts. Don't be a litter bug. Help keep America beautiful.
When he gets the most that life can give, and he gets it in hush puppies. Yeah, the man, he really knows how to live, and he does it in hush puppies.
Wolverine DuraShock, guaranteed comfort for your money back. Work like hell, feel like heaven. Wolverine DuraShock, made in the USA.
PFAS is a group, it's a class of man-made chemicals, sometimes known as forever chemicals because they don't break down, and once they enter your body, they stay in your body for a long time, and they are associated with a range of chronic diseases, including some cancers, pregnancy complications such as preeclampsia or pregnancy-induced hypertension.
The best comprehensive look at the science came from, so far it came from the C8 Science Panel, which was finished its work in 2012, ended up finding 6 conditions that were linked to exposure to PFOA in particular, and those included kidney cancer and testicular cancer. Since then, there have been a lot of other connections made with immune issues, with obesity, with developmental problems.
The chemical structure of it is such a strong bond between the carbon and the fluorine bonds that it makes it very almost indestructible in nature. Why it's so used in our manufacturing processes is because it's heat resistant, it's stain resistant. So we've used it in our carpet, we've used it in our paints, we've used it in our Teflon, in our clothing, all pieces of our society. And so unfortunately, this bond is very hard to break down.
If you have PFAS in your water, or PFOA and PFOS in particular in your water, above 70 parts per trillion, that is going to result in at least a double exposure of sort of your background of what most people are exposed to for PFAS. So most people have some measurable level of these chemicals in their bodies.
PFAS that's in the body stays there at some level for almost forever. It ends up in tissue, it ends up in organs, the kidney, the liver, and so and there it stays.
These chemicals have been used everywhere, and PFOA in particular is so toxic that the manufacturers reached a voluntary agreement with the Environmental Protection Agency about 11 years ago to phase out its use.
There's still a lot of debate over what's a protective level of concentration of PFAS in water. We're probably narrowing in on that concentration, but we're still learning a lot.
was July 2017. I got an email from a woman, and she said, did you know that there is a PFAS problem in the Rogue River? She explained a little bit more about the problem related to PFAS in the Rogue River. There was a fish advisory right there at the Rockford Dam in the Mill Pond area behind the dam, right next to where Wolverine Worldwide's former tannery was located. I learned that there was incredibly high levels of PFAS contamination in private wells on House Street in Belmont. And my first inkling of it came when I got a phone call essentially telling me that. And I thought, one, where is House Street? And two, how in the world is this stuff in private wells? We're dealing with it in the river in Rockford, and you know, these House Street, I learned, is not that far away, but nonetheless, it's not on the river.
What they did is they took tannery waste, set aside PFAS, it's full of other toxic chemicals. So it had mercury, lead, arsenic, chromium, all sorts of things in it. It's in a toxic soup, a sludge. They have it at their tannery in Rockford in the 50s and 60s, and they just take it and dump it on the ground. That's their disposal method, is to carry it over, in this particular case, to the House Street dump. And they build funnel-shaped trenches, and with the intention that they're going to put the waste into those trenches and funnel it down into the ground and into the groundwater. The argument that, well, we didn't know PFAS was bad at the time doesn't ring very true when they never did anything even after more and more information came out about PFAS.
There are two events that helped bring the contamination on House Street to light. One was when the testing from the Belmont Armory came back. The drinking water at the Armory had been tested, and it came back above the EPA's health advisory level for PFOS and PFOA. And when that happened, the DEQ and the Kent County Health Department went, oh my God, we have a huge problem. That was entirely coincidental.
They would have received a knock on their door from the health department and from Wolverine representatives to say they wanted to do testing. So at that point, there would have been nothing known.
Once I started taking a look into how the exposures there might be affecting the folks on House Street, I started looking people up by address, and I got Sandy Winstelt's name. And at that moment, I realized they live directly across the street from the dump. They are very close, and I knew this is huge. This is going to be enormous, and it's become that.
Joel and I, we wanted a home that would have no neighbors. We wanted a home that was really secluded, that had a lot of wildlife. At the time, across the street was a Christmas tree farm, and next door was a Christmas tree farm. And then the other sides are just woods, and it was just the perfect house for us. I knew when we stood on the deck that I wanted this house. It was exactly what we were looking for. You know, Joel had passed away in March of 2016. And so a year later they came. I was out for a walk, actually. They met me at the mailbox and said they wanted to test my groundwater for PFAS. And I had no idea what that was. I mean, I had literally never heard of that, ever. So I said, I don't care, go ahead. Probably 2-3 weeks later, I got a call, and she said, can you come home now so we can meet with you? There's a group of us. And I knew groups don't come to deliver good news. So we actually sat right here. There was a whole group of us, and they explained that my water had tested, I want to say it was like 21,000 parts per trillion, 24,000 parts per trillion, something like that. Again, if you don't know anything about this, those numbers are meaningless. They decided to come and test the water again because they were afraid that because it was so high, it was probably an error, a testing error. And then the next time they came back, it was like 38,000 parts per trillion. So, and it's been as high as I think 78,000 parts per trillion over the last year. Interestingly, they started bringing in bottled water. Like literally, 2 people got up and started carrying in bottled water. So I thought then, well, this isn't good. So they all left, and I called my sister-in-law. Joel's sister and I talked every day. Here's what they said, and she burst into tears and said, oh my God, that's what killed Joel. Because my well levels are so much higher than just about anybody else, I had my blood tested, and so my blood work came back. And it depends on how you interpret the test. You know, if you go to parts per trillion or parts per billion, it's way high. Let's put it that way. It's off the charts high.
The thing is that while there's all this sudden focus in June, July, August on House Street, the alarm wasn't really spreading across the highway, right? Between House Street and Chandler Drive, where Tobin McNaughton and her family live, 131 goes through. And so there's no real connection there between the neighborhoods. So on Chandler Drive, which is more or less immediately south of House Street and the dump, nobody was going to those properties and saying, hey, you should be careful. The state wasn't knocking on their door telling them about what was going on House Street. They weren't asking to test their water. Wolverine wasn't doing it. And who was doing it was Varnum Law.
I'm Tobin McNaughton. I am a teacher at the Grand Rapids Early Discovery Center. I take care of about 11 infants, and Jack gets to come to work with me, so it's a good deal.
I'm Seth McNaughton. I work at DTE Gas Operations. I keep the gas in the pipes and people safe.
This was the first house we looked at together, and we were like, this is a good house. It's got enough yard. We wanted a big yard.
Jenny Carney, and I work as an office assistant at a hospital in the area.
My name's Luke Carney. I work in facility maintenance also at a hospital.
We moved here 8 years ago.
Pretty much a dream home that at the time we couldn't afford, but we made do with some different cuts, and this is where we are today.
The house had everything that we wanted, so yeah, we definitely did what we could to get into this house.
Yeah, we liked the spacing, like there was neighbors but not too close together, and yeah, we just really liked it and went for it.
Well, we were looking for a home to start a family, and we wanted it to be a safe, newer place that didn't need to be worked on, that we could just focus on having a healthy environment for starting, the next years in our lives and increasing our family. Country, big yards, acreage.
So it's a newer type house, and definitely no one told us there was a dump anywhere around here. And honestly, we didn't think to ask, but you just kind of think, this isn't like a neighborhood area.
And so had we known that there was a dump nearby, we would have walked away immediately. We wouldn't even given it a second look.
So we found out that our water was contaminated potentially, not through the DEQ, not through the EPA, not through the potential contaminant, whoever put the contaminant in this place. We actually found out from a law firm with a certified letter that showed up on our doorstep.
I was homesick with Jack, and an intern from the Varnum Lawyer Group came to the door and just delivered a letter to me and said, we're letting people in this area know about some possible water contamination. Here's the letter, we're having a meeting, come if you want to. And I was like, this is weird.
Then we sat through a actual meeting and it really hit home. From there it spiraled downhill. It's kind of a pretty big shocker. Go through every day just fine and dandy, and a week later that you're just shell-shocked and you don't know which way to go.
And then some of the neighbors started talking about the scraps of leather and the barrels in their yards and along the river, and just the extent of it, and the how much area it covered, it was surprising to me. I didn't really know about it. I knew that there was the tannery in downtown Rockford. I've heard stuff before that like the downtown area probably has contaminants in the Rogue River and just kind of, but that's probably what, 5 miles at least from here, and we're not really downriver from that either, so I never thought of that as an issue.
You can't trust anything. The location of where the chemicals were dumped that affected our well water, we all thought it was just a pretty Christmas tree farm. That's all anybody ever thought that was. Nobody's gonna know any different. Nobody's gonna look up every parcel within a 5-mile radius of when they buy a home and look up the property history. I mean, that's just not something that people do to find out whether or not their drinking water is gonna be contaminated.
When this all started, I think it's almost made grief harder, because when you go through grief, you have to do some things to help yourself move through that. And I remember exercising that day and thinking, I feel happy for the first time in probably a year. And yeah, my husband died a year earlier. And then these people come to my door. And now it's like all these what ifs keep coming back. Was this what caused it? Was there something I could have done? I think I had better closure before this happened. This almost like ripped the wound open again.
So at 6 months old, we moved Kendall into the house. Dylan was 7. She is now 8. She was on formula. She drank probably most water out of anybody here the first couple years of living here. Shortly after that, I started taking Dylan for checkups because of stomach pains. There's only so much we can do, and our hands are tied at the moment of, okay, there's no place to go get her blood work. What is the blood work going to even tell us? You're now 14 months into it, and you don't have a clue. What's it going to tell us?
And so we had Jack's checked out. He got a pretty extensive blood draw where he had to get 13 vials of blood taken out. And so the PFAS was sticking to his vaccines and making it not work. So the virus could have got into his body and he could have got really sick.
Every time that the kids are sick, I don't know if it's just a normal illness that the kids have or if it's from the water. So it's just, it can't be any more stressful than this.
Yeah, the unknown in terms of how it may affect Jack as he grows up, I think that weighs very, very heavily on Seth and Tobin. I have a daughter. She's going to be 3 in March, and her mother was drinking Grand Rapids water throughout her pregnancy, and then we moved to Sparta and was drinking Sparta water, and then, after Olive was born, Sparta, they found, about 2 parts per trillion of PFBS, and Sparta, even with that low level, shut down its well. Right, and then there's a lot of other water systems in Michigan that have got much, much higher levels and haven't done anything.
One of the things I know they have said that's a silver lining in all this is they've really gotten to know their neighbors, whereas they used to just come home from work, drive in, and barely knew anybody even down the street. They all know each other quite well now. They have really done their best to make the most of this situation and to be as proactive as they can. There's a number of examples of that, but one is 3 of these residents traveled to Washington, D.C. to meet with Senator Stabenow and Senator Peters and Representative Amash.
And we have seen firsthand the devastation and community experiences.
When I did finally meet Sandy, it was at a gathering of several folks who lived in the neighborhood. They sat down on the porch on the back deck at Sandy's home, and they sort of described what their summer was like. They sort of laid it all out for me. The best thing I can describe it was that they were more or less describing the stages of a grieving process. I mean, it was a summer that changed their lives. There's before the Wolverine and after Wolverine for these people.
The houses that were affected on this street were the highest affected homes on the street. We found out on the same day. We kind of had a pity party that afternoon. We all packed up coolers and met in the middle backyards, and so we all kind of just hung out, and we've been leaning on each other since then. When we have bad days, we know that that's totally normal, that out of the blue, you'll just have a bad day. It hits you randomly, that you're just like, this really sucks. And there's really no reason why just on a random Wednesday you're like, this really sucks. And then you'll go for a while and just kind of make jokes about it just to get through. And so yeah, community is definitely the only way that we're getting through this.
None of us knew anybody. None of us knew each other. My husband died a year earlier, and no one in the neighborhood had known it. That's how disconnected we were all. They came up to me and gave me a hug and said, we had no idea you were a widow, and if there's ever anything you need, I want you to call us. And the irony was, Joel was such a jerk to those guys. For them to take such good care of me now is ironic beyond belief.
You know, there was like whistleblowers out there that were saying, like, doing some of the research and saying, you know, something's not right here. This could be a really big problem, but then people are just ignoring them, and you know, you're just some neighborhood watch group, like, you know, you're crazy or something. I just feel like there's people that were just ignoring them when they should have been listening.
You look at the advocacy, and almost all these stories are the same. There tend to be the first people who are sounding the alarm. And almost always, those people are criticized, they're fear-mongering, they don't have all the facts, they're causing trouble, quote unquote, and that is typically what you hear. But in the end, who's proven right? If people had listened years earlier, we would have gotten to this that much sooner.
I'm a big believer in when the people lead, the leaders will follow, and I think this will change with citizen action and community engagement. I think the citizens have to figure out who's more likely to be responsive to them, state government or federal government, because a lot of these folks are volunteers.
We just want it, you know, to be broadcast, like, so other groups of people can start to learn about these things and maybe be alerted in their area. Like, I just want people to realize that they have a voice. Do your research, advocate for yourself, make those phone calls, even if you think it's hard or maybe a waste of time. It probably isn't.
There are a lot of state regulators and policymakers elsewhere other than Michigan that are watching, you know, what is going on here.
There actually is a group from Japan that is looking at us because they have some PFAS issues and they have no regulations over there. And so they have taken an interest in our story.
In Michigan, regulators were going to Minnesota looking for advice on how to proceed. Minnesota is the home of 3M.
Because my neighbors, my community, you know, my friends were in the same situation. And when we go to public meetings, you know, I'd stand up in front of the room and you know, you're the bureaucrat in charge. You know, you're there to answer the questions, face the music of the community that's outraged, understandably outraged.
I'm just focused on making sure this doesn't happen to the next community, making sure the next people that buy their dream home 20 years later aren't saddled with a mess that they can't get out from under.
What we look for in any case like this are really two things. One is accountability on the part of Wolverine. They say publicly they're accountable and they're going to do the right thing and they've been here 100 years and blah, blah, blah. Well, what that actually means is more than words. It means you got to step up and own the problem. And instead what they are doing is they spend millions of dollars to remodel their headquarters. They pay out millions of dollars in bonuses to their CEO, and not one penny to the McNaughtons and not one penny to any of the other people who are affected that have homes they can't sell, homes that are devalued, and now health concerns related to all of this. So accountability is a big part of this process. That is certainly what these cases are about.